There is a moment, and if you have lived long enough in the tight chest of financial struggle, you know exactly what I am talking about, where you stop believing the problem is outside of you, where the job market, the economy, the timing, the bad luck, all of it starts to feel like a convenient story. A story that lets you off the hook, yes, but also keeps you locked in a room with no windows. I know that moment. I have sat inside it. I have memorized its texture, its silence, its specific kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. And I am here to tell you something that nobody said to me when I needed it most. You were never broke. Not once, not ever. What you were, what I was blocked. And the difference between those two words is the difference between a life sentence and a key. I did not arrive at this understanding through a weekend seminar or a motivational quote on a Monday morning. I arrive here through the kind of darkness that strips you of every borrowed belief and forces you to look at what remains. What remained when everything else fell away was a pulse, a frequency, something ancient and sovereign inside me that had never actually agreed to the story of scarcity I had been living. And when I found that thing, when I pressed my hand against it and felt it pushed back, the entire architecture of my financial reality began to shift. Not because I found a new strategy, because I found the obstruction and I removed it. That is what this is about. That is what we are doing here together right now. Before we go any further, I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. Feel the weight of your own breath. Notice if there is tightness somewhere in your chest or your stomach, that low hum of financial anxiety that has become so familiar you have stopped noticing it as unusual. That sensation is not a character flaw. It is not evidence of your inadequacy. It is a signal. It is your energetic system pointing directly at the blockage. And by the time we move through what I am about to share, that sensation will have a name, a root, and a way out. Stay with me. I want you to think about the first time you heard the word enough used as a weapon. Not as a comfort, you are enough, but as a ceiling. There is not enough. We cannot afford that. Money does not grow on trees. People like us do not live like that. You were small when you heard it. You were in a body that had not yet learned to question the voices of the giants around you. And so you did what every child does with the words of those they love and depend on. You swallowed them. You made them yours. You built your inner world around them the way a tree grows around a fence, incorporating the obstruction so completely that eventually you cannot see where the tree ends and the wound begins. That is what scarcity programming is. That is where it lives, not in your bank account, but in the marrow of your assumptions. The science of this is as old as the mountains and as precise as any laboratory. When a child receives a repeated emotional signal, lack, danger, not enough, the nervous system encodes that signal as truth. Not as opinion, not as one possible interpretation of reality, as immutable fact, the way gravity is a fact, the way the sun rising is a fact. And from that encoding forward, every financial decision, every opportunity assessed, every risk evaluated passes through that filter. You do not see the world as it is. You see it through the lens of the wound. And the wound always sees scarcity, because scarcity was its first and loudest teacher. This is not a spiritual abstraction. This is the architecture of your lived experience, and it has been running quietly in the background of every financial chapter of your life. I remember sitting at a kitchen table, I will not tell you whose, because the story belongs to someone I love, and watching the way a hand moved across a bill, the way you might handle something froggy, lie, and dangerous simultaneously. The body language of financial shame is unmistakable once you have seen it. Shoulders pulled in, breath shallow, eyes averted as if looking directly at the numbers would make the situation worse, as if the numbers themselves were alive and judgmental. I absorbed that language. I learned it fluently without ever being taught a single word. By the time I was old enough to earn my first paycheck, I already had a complicated relationship with what was in it, not because of the amount, but because of what money had always meant in the atmosphere I had grown up breathing. Here is what I need you to understand, and I need you to feel this not just intellectually, but in your body. The lie was not about money. The lie was about you. Somewhere in that early programming, scarcity and identity fused together. We don't have enough became I am not enough. We cannot afford it became I do not deserve it. These translations happened below the level of conscious thought, in the quiet, ancient part of the brain that processes survival. And survival systems do not care about your dreams. They care about keeping you within the known parameters of what feels familiar, even when what is familiar is painful. Especially then, because pain that is familiar is predictable, and to the nervous system, predictability is safety. This is why people stayed broke long after the external circumstances that created the original scarcity have changed. The external world shifted. The internal blueprint did not. And this leads us to the question that changed everything for me. The question I want to plant in you right now so that it grows as we continue. If my financial reality is a projection of an inner frequency, then what frequency have I been broadcasting? Not what have I been working toward. Not what have I been wishing for or praying for or vision boarding on a Sunday afternoon. What frequency have I actually been emitting at the level beneath the words, beneath the intentions, down in the body where the truth of what we believe lives without apology? Because that frequency, that deep, encoded, pre-verbal signal, is what the universe has been responding to, not your wishes, your wounds. And the moment I understood that, the moment I felt the full weight of it settle into me like something both terrible and liberating, I knew that nothing outside of me needed to change first. The work was internal. The breakthrough was always going to come from the inside out. Now, I am not asking you to blame yourself for the programming you received before you had the language to question it. That is not what this is. Accountability without self-punishment, that is the sovereign path. You did not choose the beliefs that were handed to you in childhood any more than you chose the language you first spoke. But you are here now. You are conscious now. You have the extraordinary capacity, which most of the animal kingdom does not share, to look at the contents of your own mind and say, this is not mine. This was never mine. And I am putting it down. That act, that single, courageous act of laying down an inherited belief, is the first crack in the wall. And once the wall has a crack, the golden current always finds a way through. Always. Without exception. Because abundance is not something you create. It is something you allow once you have cleared the obstruction that was blocking its natural and sovereign flow toward you. Let me describe something to you, and I want you to tell me if this sounds familiar. You are working. You are working hard, genuinely, consistently, with real effort and real intention. You are doing the things you are supposed to do. You are showing up. You are studying. You are applying. You are networking, creating, producing, grinding through the hours with a discipline that should, by every logical measure, be producing results. And yet the results arrive then, or they arrive and then evaporate, or they do not arrive at all and you are left standing in the ruins of another effort wondering what invisible force keeps intercepting your momentum. You cannot see it. You cannot name it. But you can feel it, that resistance, that ceiling, that sense of running full speed into something transparent and immovable. That is not bad luck. That is not the economy. That is not your competition outworking you. That is a wall, and it is built entirely from the inside. The most sophisticated prisons are the ones with no visible bars. I have been inside one. I have paced its perimeter so many times that I knew every corner by heart without ever once recognizing it as a cage. From the inside, an energetic blockage does not feel like a wall. It feels like reality. It feels like the natural order of things. It feels like this is just how life works for someone like me, which is perhaps the most dangerous sentence a human being can think, because it disguises a belief as a fact and a wound as a worldview. When I look back at the years I spent in financial struggle, I can now see with surgical clarity that I was not failing. I was succeeding magnificently, consistently, with extraordinary precision, at reproducing the exact energetic pattern I had been programmed to reproduce. The universe was not ignoring me. It was answering me perfectly. Here is what an energetic blockage actually is beneath the spiritual language, at the level of lived human experience. It is a contradiction between what you consciously want and what you unconsciously expect. And expectation, real expectation, the kind that lives in the body rather than the mind, always wins. Always. You can want abundance with every conscious thought you have. You can affirm it. Declare it, write it on every mirror in your house. But if somewhere in the basement of your nervous system there is an old, encoded signal that says this is not for you, this never lasts, something always goes wrong. That signal is the one the universe is reading, not your affirmations, your expectations, and the gap between those two things is exactly the width of the invisible wall. I want to tell you about a pattern I noticed in myself that I have since recognized in hundreds of people who came to me carrying the same quiet desperation dressed up in different circumstances. Every time I got close to a financial breakthrough, every time the numbers started to move, every time an opportunity crystallized into something real, something happened. Not always something dramatic. Sometimes it was subtle. A sudden doubt that made me hesitate at the critical moment. An inexplicable self-sabotage that I would rationalize afterward with impressive creativity. A physical sensation of discomfort so strong that forward motion felt genuinely dangerous, the way stepping off a cliff feels dangerous, even when the ground is only an inch below. I was not doing this consciously. No one does. But I was doing it with breathtaking consistency, and the consistency itself was the clue. Because random bad luck is not consistent. Patterns are consistent, and patterns have sources. The source, when I finally traced it all the way back through the layers of rationalization and story and carefully constructed self-image, was a single, ancient belief that I had never once examined in the full light of adult consciousness. And the belief was this: receiving too much makes you unsafe, not undeserving and safe. Because in the environment where my earliest financial programming was laid down, abundance attracted attention, and attention attracted danger. And danger was something the people I loved had very good reasons to fear. I had inherited not just a belief about scarcity, but a protective strategy disguised as a belief. My financial ceiling was not a punishment. It was armor. And you cannot dissolve armor by wanting it gone. You have to understand what it was protecting you from, thank it for its service, and then consciously, deliberately, with your full sovereign authority, choose a different way to be safe in the world. And this leads us to something I mentioned at the beginning, the idea that the frequency beneath the fear is the real terrain we need to map. Because once I understood that the wall was not random, that it had a logic and a history and even a kind of love buried inside it, everything changed. The wall stopped feeling like an enemy. It started feeling like a messenger. And messengers, when you finally stop running from them and turn to face them, always carry something you need. Always. What mine carried was the blueprint of my own liberation, the precise map of exactly where the blockage lived and exactly what it would take to move it. That map is what I am going to hand you chapter by chapter as we continue this journey together. And this leads us directly into the terrain I need you to be ready for, because chapter 3 is where we go beneath the surface, where we stop talking about the wall and start talking about the frequency that built it. I want you to do something with me right now, and I need you to resist the urge to intellectualize it. I need you to feel it. Place one hand on your sternum, the center of your chest, and I want you to think, not about money in the abstract, but about a specific number. The number in your account right now, or the number of a bill that is sitting somewhere in your awareness like a stone you keep stepping around. Feel what happens in your body when that number becomes real and present. Notice the constriction, or the heat, or the sudden desire to think about something else entirely. That physical response, that involuntary, instantaneous, completely honest reaction, is not an emotion. It is a frequency. It is the signal your body has been broadcasting into the energetic field around you every single time the subject of money enters your consciousness. And if that signal is one of contraction, of dread, of low-grade panic wrapped in the clothing of practicality, then that is the frequency the universe has been receiving from you. Not your words. That frequency is not a metaphor I use loosely or romantically. When I say that every human being broadcasts a vibrational signature, I am describing something that ancient wisdom traditions across every culture on this earth have named and worked with for thousands of years, long before modern physics began to catch up with the language. The Vedic concept of prana, the Chinese concept of qi, the Polynesian concept of mana, these are all pointing at the same observable truth, that the human body is not a solid object moving through an indifferent world. It is a field of energy in constant communication with the field of energy around it. And the dominant emotional frequencies you carry, the ones encoded so deeply they operate below conscious awareness, are the primary language of that communication. Lack has a frequency. Shame has a frequency. Fear has a frequency. And they are not quiet. They are extraordinarily loud, broadcasting at a bandwidth that the logical mind cannot hear, but the universe responds to with unerring accuracy. When I first encountered this understanding, really encountered it, not as an idea to be evaluated, but as a truth to be reckoned with, my first response was resistance. Because if my frequency was generating my financial reality, then I had to accept a level of responsibility that felt, initially, unbearable. It was so much easier, so much more comfortable, to locate the problem outside of myself, in the system, in the circumstances, in the people who had wronged me, overlooked me, undervalued me. And some of those things were real. I am not asking you to pretend that external injustice does not exist, because it does, and spiritual bypassing, using metaphysics as a way to avoid legitimate grievances, is its own kind of blockage. But here is what I had to reckon with. Even within unjust systems, some people break through. Even within identical circumstances, outcomes diverge wildly, and the variable that most consistently explained that divergence was not talent, not timing, not even effort. It was the inner frequency from which the effort was being generated. There is a specific vibrational signature to lack that I want to describe in detail, because recognition is the beginning of release. The frequency of lack feels like perpetual bracing, like the body is always preparing for impact. It has a quality of vigilance that never fully relaxes, even in moments of genuine safety, because the nervous system has been trained to treat abundance as temporary and loss as inevitable. People operating from this frequency often describe a sensation of waiting for the other shoe to drop, an inability to fully inhabit good news, a reflexive skepticism about their own wins, a compulsive need to mentally prepare for the worst even when the present moment offers no evidence of threat. This is not pessimism as a personality trait. This is the nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do: protect you from the devastation of hope by never fully allowing it. And while that strategy made a certain kind of sense in the environment where it was born, it is catastrophically counterproductive in the energetic economy of manifestation. I developed what I now call the frequency diagnostic, not a test you take on paper, but a practice of radical honest attention that I am going to walk you through right now. For the next few moments, I want you to bring to mind the concept of receiving a large, unexpected sum of financial resources. Not earning it, receiving it, a gift, an inheritance, a windfall, a commission that exceeds anything you have previously experienced. Hold that scenario in your mind and watch, without judgment, with genuine scientific curiosity, what your body does. If you feel expansion, warmth, a kind of electric aliveness in the chest and hands, your frequency around receiving is relatively open. But if you feel a subtle contraction, a twist of discomfort, an impulse to immediately begin calculating problems or responsibilities or reasons why this would complicate your life, that contraction is your diagnostic result. That is the frequency signature of a receiving blockage, and it is one of the most common and least discussed forms of financial obstruction I have ever encountered. Because here is the truth that rewired my entire understanding of why I had struggled for so long. I had been focused entirely on my capacity to generate wealth, when the actual obstruction was in my capacity to receive it. I was a magnificent generator running into a closed valve. I could produce energy, effort, ideas, value, and then, at the precise moment when that value was about to convert into financial resources flowing toward me, Something in my system would interfere. I would underprice my work. I would deflect compliments that carried monetary weight. I would unconsciously engineer situations where my compensation was reduced or delayed or redirected. Not because I was self-destructive in any dramatic sense, because receiving felt dangerous at a frequency level, and my system prioritized safety over abundance every single time. The moment I identified that pattern, the moment I stopped looking at my income and started looking at my receiving frequency, was the moment the entire landscape of my financial life began to reorganize itself around a new end. Sovereign truth. And this leads us to the chapter that I have been building toward since the very first word of this journey, the moment I want to share with you that I call the quantum reversal. The moment I stopped fighting. The moment I stopped pushing and straining and forcing and efforting my way toward a prosperity that kept retreating before me like a horizon. The moment I understood that abundance was not something I needed to chase, conquer, or deserve. It was something I needed to become, and becoming it required a kind of inner revolution so quiet, so precise, and so complete that the world around me had no choice but to rearrange itself in response. There is a particular kind of tired that comes not from doing too much but from doing everything. Wrong, not wrong in the moral sense, wrong in the directional sense. Like rowing with tremendous power and discipline directly away from the shore you are trying to reach and wondering, with genuine bewilderment, why the distance keeps increasing. I know that tired. I lived inside it for years. And the cruelest part of it was that my effort was real. My desire was sincere. My strategies were logical, even intelligent. I was not lazy. I was not careless. I was not lacking in faith or intention or willingness to sacrifice. What I was lacking was the one thing no productivity system, no financial strategy, no motivational framework had ever told me I needed: the ability to stop, to genuinely, completely, without agenda or ulterior motive stop. Not as a tactic, not as a reset before the next push, but as an act of radical surrender to something larger and more intelligent than my own relentless, terrified trying. The quantum reversal happened on an ordinary afternoon. I want to be precise about this because I think we have a cultural addiction to dramatic transformation narratives, the lightning bolt, the vision, the sudden collapse that cracks everything open. And while those things happen, they are not the only portal. Sometimes the most profound shift arrives quietly, almost boringly, in the middle of a Tuesday when nothing spectacular is occurring, and you simply become, for one unguarded moment, completely honest with yourself. That was my afternoon. I was sitting with the full weight of my financial reality pressing down on me, and instead of doing what I always did, strategizing, planning, pushing the anxiety into productive motion, I just sat with it. I let it be as heavy as it actually was. I stopped performing okayness at myself. And in that undefended space, something spoke. Not in words, exactly. In a knowing. A recognition so clear it had the quality of remembering rather than discovering. And what I remembered was this: I am not separate from the source of abundance. I never was. The struggle was never about deserving more. It was about remembering what I already was. I want to unpack that recognition slowly, because it contains more than it appears to on the surface. The dominant paradigm around wealth, the one we absorb from culture, from family, from the entire architecture of the economic system we are born into, positions abundance as something external, something out there finite, competitive, that must be pursued, earned, and defended. In this paradigm, you are here and wealth is there, and the distance between you is a function of your merit, your strategy, and your willingness to outperform everyone else reaching for the same limited supply. This paradigm is not just limiting, it is, at the frequency level, catastrophically counterproductive, because the moment you position yourself as separate from abundance, as someone who must travel toward it from a place of lack, you have already encoded the frequency of lack as your starting point. And you cannot reach prosperity from lack any more than you can arrive at warmth by broadcasting cold. The physics simply do not work that way. The quantum reversal is the moment you flip the entire model. It is the moment you stop asking how do I get there and start asking what would it feel like to already be there and then. And this is the part that requires genuine courage. You commit to feeling that way before the external evidence supports it. This is not delusion. This is not pretending your bills do not exist or your bank account does not say what it says. This is understanding that the energetic field you inhabit precedes and informs the physical reality you experience, and that shifting the field is always, always the first move, not the last move after everything else has failed. The first move, the foundational move, the move that makes every subsequent action exponentially more effective because it is now being generated from a frequency of sufficiency rather than a frequency of lack. And the difference in what those two frequencies attract is not incremental. It is quantum. It is the difference between fishing in a dry riverbed and casting your line into an infinite ocean. Now I want to guide you through the visualization that dismantled my deepest financial blockage, and I need you to come with me fully. Find a position where your spine is relatively straight and your hands are resting open, palms up, in your lap. That physical gesture of openness is not incidental. The body and the mind are in constant conversation, and open palms signal receiving at a level beneath conscious thought, recalibrating the nervous system toward a posture of receptivity rather than defense. Take 3 slow breaths, not performed breaths, real ones. The kind where you actually feel the ribcage expand and the belly soften. And now, with your eyes closed, I want you to imagine that beneath you, beneath the chair, beneath the floor, beneath the foundation of the building, going all the way down through layers of earth and rock and ancient stone, there is a current. Not water, not electricity, but something that has qualities of both. Warm, intelligent. Moving. It has been moving since before you were born. It will be moving long after every current circumstance of your life has transformed beyond recognition. This current is the energetic substrate of all material abundance. It is not scarce. It cannot be depleted. It does not have a preference for certain people over others. It flows toward whatever is open to receive it, the way water flows toward whatever is open to hold it. Feel that current now beginning to rise through the earth beneath you, through the floor, through the base of your spine, moving upward through the center of your body the way sap moves through the heartwood of an ancient tree, slowly and stoppably, with a kind of patient power that has no need for urgency because it has never once doubted its own inevitability. As it rises through your belly, feel the contraction there, the tightness, the held breath of financial anxiety. And instead of fighting it or fixing it, simply let the current move through it. The way a river moves through a canyon, the obstruction does not stop the river. The river, given enough time and enough volume, reshapes the canyon. Feel the current moving through your chest now, through that place where financial fear lives as a low, persistent ache. And feel it warming that space the way sunlight warms a room that has been closed too long. Not forcing the fear out, simply filling the space with something warmer, more ancient, more real. Let it rise into your throat, into the space behind your eyes, until you are not just imagining the current but feeling it, actually feeling it, as a physical sensation of warmth and expansion. And so, nothing that I can only describe as recognition, as coming home to a frequency that was always yours, that was only ever temporarily obscured by the fog of inherited belief. And now, from inside that current, from inside that warmth, I want you to feel what it is like to be someone for whom abundance is not a destination but a nature. Not someone who has a lot of money, someone who is the frequency of prosperity. Feel the difference in your shoulders. Feel the difference in your breath. Feel the way the future looks from this vantage point, not threatening, not uncertain in the anxious sense, but open, genuinely, sovereignly, expansively open. The way the ocean looks from a cliff on a clear morning, where you can see farther than you can name, and everything you see is alive and moving and entirely, unutterably available. Stay in that feeling for as long as you can hold it, because every second you inhabit that frequency, you are doing more real, structural work on your financial reality than a month of anxious strategy ever accomplished. You are not pretending. You are practicing. And practice done consistently becomes identity, and identity becomes destiny. When you open your eyes, something will have shifted. It may be subtle, a lightness, a slight loosening of the chronic tension you have been carrying so long you forgot it was there. Or it may be more pronounced, a clarity, a sudden seeing of possibilities that were always present but invisible through the lens of the old frequency. Either way, something has moved, and this leads us to the work that consolidates that movement, the work I call the sacred audit, the inner inventory that locates, names, and begins the process of healing the specific financial wounds that have been running your life from the basement of your unconscious. Because the quantum reversal opens the door. The sacred audit is how you walk all the way through it. Most people, when they think about auditing their finances, think about spreadsheets, about columns and rows and the brutal arithmetic of what comes in versus what goes out. And while that kind of clarity has its place, it is not the audit I am talking about. The sacred audit has nothing to do with your bank statements. It has everything to do with your belief statements, the ones you have never written down, never spoken aloud, possibly never even allowed yourself to fully think in the clear light of conscious awareness, because some part of you understood correctly that looking at them directly would require you to do something about them. This audit goes into the places most financial advice never touches. It goes into the body, into the memory, into the inherited architecture of your relationship with worthiness, with receiving, with the specific and personal story you have been telling yourself about why abundance has always seemed to belong more naturally to other people than to it belongs to you. I want to begin with a question that I call the first door, and I want you to sit with it rather than answer it quickly. Quick answers to deep questions are almost always the armor talking rather than the truth. The first door question is this: what is the earliest memory you have of feeling that there was not enough? Not the earliest memory of being told there was not enough. The earliest memory of feeling it in your body, as a sensory and emotional experience. For some people this arrives as a scene around a dinner table. For others it is a specific object, a toy, a piece of clothing, an experience that other children had and you did not. And the feeling that accompanied that absence was not simple disappointment but something more complex, more layered, tinged with shame or confusion or a nascent sense of difference that you did not yet have words for. Find your scene. Find your moment. And when you find it, do not analyze it yet. Just let it be present. Let it exist in the room with you the way you might let a photograph exist. Something that carries information, something that can be looked at without being relived. The second door of the sacred audit asks a question that most people find significantly more uncomfortable than the first, because it implicates not strangers or systems, but the people we love. The second door question is, what did the person you most admired in childhood believe about money? Not what they said they believed, what they demonstrated they believed through their behavior, their body language, their emotional responses to financial events, the way they held or avoided or pursued or feared the subject in the daily atmosphere of your shared life. Because beliefs are not primarily transmitted through words. They are transmitted through example, through repetition, through the emotional weather of a household that a child breathes in as naturally and as unconsciously as air. The person you most admired, the one whose approval mattered most, whose way of being in the world you unconsciously used as a template for your own. That person handed you a financial belief system as surely as they handed you their eye color or the particular way they laughed. And it is running in you right now, shaping your decisions and your expectations and your frequency, whether or not it has ever been examined. When I walked through my own second door, what I found was not what I expected. I expected to find fear. What I found instead was something more nuanced and, ultimately, more instructive. I found a belief that financial struggle was a form of integrity. That people who accumulated significant wealth had, somewhere along the line, compromised something essential: their authenticity, their relationships, their connection to what genuinely mattered. I found, embedded deep in the person I most admired, a quiet but absolute equation between abundance and corruption. And because I loved and admired that person with the whole of my early heart, I had made their equation mine. Not consciously, never consciously, but completely. So completely that every time I approached a level of financial success that felt significant, my system would register it as a moral threat, as evidence that I was becoming someone I did not want to be, that financial breakthrough and personal integrity were mutually exclusive, and that choosing one required sacrificing the other. Finding that belief, actually seeing it with my own eyes, in the full light of adult understanding, was one of the most disorienting and liberating moments of my life. Because I could finally see that the ceiling I had been hitting was not made of glass. It was made of love. Misguided, inherited, outdated love, but love nonetheless. And love, unlike most substances, can be thanked and released without being destroyed. The third door is the one that requires the most courage, and I will not pretend otherwise. The third door question is, what do you believe will be lost if you become truly, sustainably, abundantly wealthy? Not what do you fear will be lost, what do you believe will be lost at that deep, honest, pre-rational level where the actual architecture of your financial reality is constructed. Because almost everyone who carries a significant financial blockage is, at the level of their deepest unconscious strategy, protecting something. Protecting a relationship that they fear abundance would alter or destroy. Protecting an identity. The scrappy one, the humble one. The spiritual one who is not attached to material things, that has become load-bearing in their sense of self. Protecting a community belonging because in some families and cultures, outgrowing the financial norm of the group is experienced, consciously or not, as a form of abandonment. These are not irrational fears. They are ancient, tribal, deeply human. The nervous system does not distinguish between financial expansion and social exile. To the oldest parts of the brain, being cast out from the group is a survival threat, and any behavior that risks that casting out will be unconsciously suppressed with extraordinary efficiency. My own third door revealed two things simultaneously, and they arrived together the way truths often do as a pair, each one illuminating the other. The first was a fear of losing my relatability, a deep, almost cellular anxiety that if I moved beyond the financial experience of the people I loved most, I would no longer be able to truly understand them or be understood by them. That prosperity would build a wall between us more solid and more final than any argument or distance ever had. The second was subtler and took longer to name, a belief that my creative and spiritual gifts were contingent on my struggle, that the sensitivity, the depth, the capacity for empathy that I valued most in myself had been forged in difficulty and would be softened or erased by ease. That comfort would make me ordinary in a way that suffering never had. I had romanticized my own financial pain, not deliberately, not even knowingly, but thoroughly. And that romanticization was perhaps the most elegant and insidious blockage of all, because it had dressed itself in the language of artistic identity and spiritual depth, making it almost impossible to see as the limitation it actually was. Naming these things, walking through all three doors with a lantern of honest attention, did not immediately dissolve the blockages. I want to be truthful with you about that, because any suggestion that awareness alone is sufficient would be a disservice to the real work involved. What naming them did was change my relationship to them. Before I named them, they operated as invisible governors, automatic systems running below the level of my conscious participation, making decisions about my financial life that I experienced as external reality. After naming them, they became visible, and visible things can be engaged with, questioned, challenged, eventually, with the right tools and the right intention and the right quality of sustained attention, transformed. The blockage does not vanish the moment you see it, but the moment you see it, it loses the one weapon that made it truly invincible, the weapon of invisibility. And this leads us to the work of actual dissolution, the ancient, precise, neurospiritual process I call rewiring the blueprint, where we take everything the sacred audit has revealed and begin the sovereign work of replacing it with something that actually serves the life you are here to live. There is a moment in the life of every structure, a bridge, a building, a belief system, where reinforcing what already exists is no longer possible, where the foundation has been so thoroughly compromised by time and stress and the particular weight of what has been built upon it that the only honest, the only genuinely forward-moving option is to go all the way down to the bedrock and begin again, not with destruction as the goal, with renewal as the intention. That is where we are now. You have walked through the 3 doors. You have seen what was inside them. You have felt, perhaps for the first time with full conscious clarity, the specific shape and history and hidden logic of the beliefs that have been quietly governing your financial life from a level B and at your awareness. And now comes the work that I consider the most sacred of all the work I have ever done, not dramatic, not instantaneous, but real in the way that only slow and genuine transformation ever truly is. The rewiring, the deliberate, patient, neurospiritual reconstruction of an inner architecture that was built for survival and must now be rebuilt for sovereignty. I want to start with something that most conversations about mindset change completely overlook, and its omission is responsible for why so many people do the work, feel the insight, experience the momentary breakthrough, and then find themselves, weeks or months later, back inside the same patterns they thought they had dissolved. The oversight is this: the mind changes through insight, but the nervous system changes through repetition. These are not the same process. They do not operate on the same timeline, and confusing them is the source of enormous frustration and unnecessary self-blame. When you walk through a door of understanding, when you see a belief clearly for the first time and feel the genuine liberation of that seeing, your mind has genuinely shifted. Something real has occurred, but the body, the nervous system, the encoded cellular memory of years and decades of running the old pattern that does not update in response to a single insight the way a software program updates in response to a single command. It updates through experience, through new experiences, repeated with enough consistency and enough emotional charge that they gradually, measurably, permanently overwrite the old encoding. This is not a spiritual opinion. This is neuroscience, and understanding it is what separates people who have breakthrough experiences from people who have breakthrough lives. The first technique I used and still use, with the same devotion I bring to any sacred practice, I call somatic reauthoring. It begins not in the mind but in the body, because the body is where the old blueprint actually lives. Not in your thoughts, in your tissues, in the particular way your jaw tightens when a financial conversation begins, in the way your breath shallows when you look at a price tag that exceeds your comfort zone, in the involuntary muscular bracing that happens so automatically when money is the subject that you have stopped registering it as a response and started experiencing it as just the way your body feels. Somatic reauthoring works by deliberately, consciously introducing new physical experiences in direct response to financial triggers. When the jaw tightens, you choose, with full awareness and intention, to soften it. When the breath shallows, you choose to deepen it. When the bracing begins, you choose expansion, not because the fear is not real, not because the trigger is not present, but because you are training your nervous system, one conscious choice at a time, to produce a different physical response to the same stimulus, and over time, not immediately, but with the kind of patient consistency that compounds the way interest compounds. The new response becomes the automatic one. The body learns a new language, and the new language speaks abundance. The second technique arrived in my life through a lineage of contemplative practice that I have drawn from many traditions without being known by any single one, because truth, in my experience, does not respect the borders we draw around it. I call it ancestral completion, and it addresses something that I believe is among the most under-acknowledged sources of financial blockage in the lives of people who have done significant personal allotment work and still cannot understand why they remain stuck. The source is this: we do not carry only our own financial wounds. We carry the unresolved financial wounds of the people who came before us, their losses, their shames, their thwarted ambitions, their survival strategies forged in circumstances of genuine scarcity that no longer exist but whose energetic residue has been passed forward through the generations like an heirloom nobody chose and nobody knows how to put down. Ancestral completion is the practice of consciously, lovingly, with full reverence for what those who came before you endured, completing the energetic cycle they could not complete in their own lifetimes. It is saying, with the full authority of your present consciousness, your struggle was real and I honor it. And it ends with me? Not because I am abandoning you, but because I am fulfilling what you could not. I am living the abundance you deserved and could not access. And in doing so, I am completing something for all of us. I want to be precise about what this practice looks like in lived experience, because I have found that when it remains abstract, it loses most of its power. Ancestral completion begins with a deliberate act of imagination, bringing to mind, with as much sensory specificity as you can generate, the ancestor whose financial wound you feel most strongly in your own patterns. Not necessarily the one you knew best or loved most, though it may be them. The one whose energetic signature you recognize in yourself most clearly. See them as they were, not as a symbol or a concept, but as a person. A full, complicated, striving, struggling human being who wanted things they could not have and feared things they could not name, just as you have. Feel the genuine compassion that arises when you see a person, any person, carrying a weight that is too heavy for them. And then, from that place of compassion rather than obligation, speak to them. Internally, silently, with the full weight of your intention. Tell them what you see. Tell them what you understand now that perhaps they never could. Tell them that you are going to live differently. Not as a rejection of them, but as a completion of something they began. And feel, actually feel, in the body, the quality of release that accompanies that decoration. Something in the lineage shifts when you make that choice consciously. Something that has been waiting for exactly this permission exhales. The third technique is the one I call quantum identity installation, and it is the most cognitively demanding of the three because it requires you to sustain a fiction long enough for it to become a fact. The fiction is this: you are already the person who lives in financial freedom, not who will be, not who is working toward being, not who deserves to be, who already is. And the practice is to make decisions, moment by moment, from that identity rather than from your current circumstances. This sounds simple. It is not, because your current circumstances are loud, and your current identity has years of evidence supporting it, and the identity of the person you are becoming has, at the beginning, nothing but your own sovereign insistence to recommend it. But here is what I learned, and what I need you to understand at the level of lived conviction rather than intellectual agreement. Identity always precedes evidence. Always. The evidence does not create the identity. The identity, held with enough consistency and enough emotional reality, creates the evidence. Every person who has ever made a significant leap in their financial life made it by deciding who they were before the bank account confirmed it. Every single one. The external confirmation came second, the internal declaration came first. That sequence is not optional. It is the law. Rewiring the ancient blueprint is not a weekend project. I want to honor you enough to say that clearly and without apology. Because you deserve honesty more than you need comfort. It is a practice that unfolds across weeks and months, gathering momentum the way a river gathers momentum, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, and then with a power that surprises even the one who has been tending it. But here is what I can promise you from the other side of it. There comes a day, and it arrives without announcement, without ceremony, in the middle of some ordinary moment, where you realize that the old pattern has not fired, that the trigger was present and the automatic response was not, that something in you has genuinely, measurably, permanently changed. And that day, that quiet, extraordinary, and remarkable-looking day, is the day you understand in your body what you have perhaps only understood in your mind until now, that the blueprint was always rereadable, that you always had the authority to revise it, that the only thing that was ever truly required was the willingness to pick up the pen. And this leads us now into the golden current, into the specific, practical, energetically precise ways of aligning with the infinite supply that has been available to you all along. waiting with the patience of something that has never once doubted your eventual arrival. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing at the edge of an ocean so vast that its opposite shore exists in a different dimension entirely, not across water but across possibility itself. The surface moves, it breathes, it catches light in 10,000 different ways simultaneously, each one a different expression of the same inexhaustible source. Now imagine that this ocean is not water but supply. Pure, intelligent, responsive, infinitely replenishing divine supply, the raw energetic substance from which all material abundance is ultimately assembled. It has no bottom, it has no shore on the other side. It does not diminish when someone draws from it, any more than the sun diminishes when it warms a hand. And you are standing at its edge right now, not approaching it from a distance, not waiting for permission to enter, standing at its edge, with the water already moving around your feet, already responding to your presence, already in contact with the energetic field of your body. The only question that has ever mattered, is whether you are open enough to let it in, whether the vessel you are bringing to this infinite shore is sealed shut by the accumulated sediment of old beliefs, or whether it is clean and open and oriented toward receiving with the full, sovereign confidence of someone who knows, at the level of cellular memory, that this ocean was always meant for them. The golden current is what I call the specific, lived experience of being in genuine alignment with the flow of divine supply. It is not a metaphor I use poetically and then abandon when we get to the practical section, because in my experience, and in the experience of everyone I have ever walked through this process, the metaphor and the mechanism are the same thing. When you are in the golden current, you feel it as a physical reality. There is a quality of ease that is categorically different from the ease of a good day or a lucky break. It has depth to it, consistency, a sense of being carried rather than pushing, of moving with something rather than against it, of effort that is real and engaged but not desperate, not strained, not generated from the anxious place that most of us have mistaken for motivation our entire lives. Things that used to require enormous force begin to require significantly less. Doors that used to be closed begin to be opened before you reach them. Conversations that used to feel like negotiations begin to feel like collaborations. None of this is magic in the dismissive sense of the word. It is physics. It is the measurable, reproducible result of a frequency shift in the field you are broadcasting, and the corresponding shift in what that field attracts toward you. The first alignment practice I want to give you is one that I call the morning calibration, and it takes 11 minutes. Not 10, not 15, 11, because the specificity matters to the practice in a way that I will explain. The first 3 minutes are spent in what I call gratitude archaeology, not the surface gratitude of counting blessings, which has its value but rarely penetrates deep enough to actually shift frequency, but a deliberate excavation of the specific, sensory, emotionally vivid details of abundance that already exist in your life right now, in this moment. Before anything changes, the warmth of water from a tap, the technology in your hand that connects you to virtually all human knowledge, the fact that your lungs are expanding and contracting without your conscious management, that an intelligence vastly more sophisticated than your thinking mind is running the biological systems that carry it you alive and present and capable of receiving this message right now. Feel each of these not as items on a list but as genuine miracles, because that is precisely what they are, and feel the specific physical sensation that genuine gratitude produces in the body. The warmth in the chest, the softening behind the eyes, the subtle but unmistakable expansion that occurs when appreciation is real rather than performed. That sensation is a frequency, and it is one of the highest receiving frequencies available to the human system. The next 4 minutes of the morning calibration are spent in what I call current immersion, the deliberate, conscious embodiment of the golden current frequency before the day has had a chance to pull you back into the reactive, stimulus response mode that most people live in most of the time. Current immersion is a visualization practice, but it is a somatic visualization, meaning the goal is not to see images clearly but to feel states completely. You are not trying to picture abundance. You are trying to inhabit it. to wear it the way you wear your own skin. Bring your awareness to the center of your body, that place just below the sternum where emotional experience tends to register most acutely, and from there begin to generate the feeling of financial freedom. Not the relief of financial freedom. Relief is a frequency of lack temporarily suspended, and it still carries the energetic signature of the thing it is relieved from. The feeling of financial freedom as a permanent state, as your nature, as simply the way things are for someone whose relationship with abundance is as uncomplicated and as unquestioned as their relationship with oxygen. Hold that feeling. Breathe into it. Let it expand with each inhale until it fills not just your chest but your entire body, fingers, feet, the crown of your head, until you are not imagining abundance but genuinely, physically, neurologically inhabiting its frequency. 4 minutes of this, done daily with genuine commitment rather than mechanical repetition, will do more for your financial reality than 4 years of anxious strategy. The final 4 minutes belong to what I call sovereign declaration, spoken aloud, because the voice carries a vibrational quality that internal thought does not, and because there is something in the act of speaking your truth into the air of the room you are physically inhabiting that makes it more real, more committed, more energetically binding than anything that remains purely interior. These declarations are not affirmations in the traditional sense. They are not statements of what you want or what you are working toward. They are statements of what you are, spoken from the identity of the person who has already completed the quantum reversal, who has already walked through the 3 doors, who has already begun the rewiring and felt the first evidence of its effects in the way their body responds to financial thoughts. Declarations like, I am a sovereign being in full alignment with the flow of divine supply. Abundance moves toward me because I have become the frequency it recognizes. I do not chase prosperity. I am its natural habitat. Say these slowly. Say them with the full weight of your breath behind them. Feel the resistance if it rises, and it will arise, especially in the beginning, and say them anyway. Not to override the resistance, but to have a conversation with it. To show it daily that you are more committed to your expansion than it is to your limitation. The second alignment practice is what I call sacred circulation, and it addresses one of the most counterintuitive truths about the golden current. A truth that stopped me cold when I first encountered it, and that I have since watched transform the financial lives of people who integrated it with genuine understanding rather than mechanical compliance. The truth is this: the flow of abundance through your life is directly proportional to your willingness to let it flow through you and onward, not to hoard it, not to grip it with the white-knuckled desperation of someone who has known scarcity and cannot quite believe the flow is real and sustainable, but to let it move, to give, to share, to invest, to circulate, with the easy confidence of someone who lives at the edge of an infinite ocean and has no anxiety about whether there will be more. Scarcity consciousness hoards because it believes the supply is finite and the next wave may not come. Abundance consciousness circulates because it knows, at the frequency level, that the circulation itself is what keeps the current moving. That generosity is not a moral virtue layered on top of financial strategy. It is the mechanism by which the channel stays open. Every act of genuine, unforced, joyful giving is an energetic declaration that you believe in the supply, and the universe, which is always listening at the frequency level, responds to that declaration with more supply to circulate. The third alignment practice I call receptivity training, and it is the most intimate of the 3 because it requires you to change your behavior in real time, in the middle of daily interactions, in ways that will initially feel uncomfortable enough that you will be tempted to skip them. Receptivity training is simply the practice of receiving fully, graciously, without deflection or minimization, every form of abundance that moves toward you in any given day. The compliment you would normally deflect with self-deprecation, receive it. Let it land. Feel it. Say thank you and mean it without immediately qualifying or diminishing the thing being offered. The unexpected opportunity you would normally second-guess into paralysis, receive it. The financial windfall, however small, that you would normally absorb without acknowledgement and immediately redirect toward a bill or an obligation, pause with it first. Feel the reality of it. Let it register as evidence that the current is moving, that the channel is open, that the ocean is real and it is moving in your direction. These moments of conscious receiving are not trivial. They are the feedback loop that trains your nervous system to recognize abundance as normal, as sustainable, as consistent with who you are rather than anomalous to it. And a nervous system that experiences abundance as normal stops generating the frequency of scarcity as its default setting, which changes everything. Downstream: the decisions, the opportunities recognized, the actions taken, the results produced. All of it reorganizes around the new normal. All of it begins to reflect back the frequency you have finally, sovereignly, unstoppably chosen to become. And this leads us now to a territory that I know many people approach with a particular mixture of hope and skepticism, the territory of action. Because everything we have covered so far has been internal work, frequency work, identity work. And there is a voice, perhaps you can hear it right now, that wants to know when we get to the practical part, when we get to the doing. And my answer to that voice is both simpler and more radical than it expects. We get to the doing right now in Chapter 8. But the doing we are going to talk about looks nothing like what that voice is anticipating. Because sovereign action generated from the golden current rather than from fear, from alignment rather than from desperation, is a categorically different animal from the hustle that most people mistake for progress. And understanding that difference is the final piece of the outer architecture of your financial transformation. I want to dismantle something that has been quietly sabotaging the financial lives of some of the most genuinely gifted, deeply intentioned people I have ever encountered, and I want to dismantle it carefully, because it is disguised as a virtue. It wears the clothing of discipline, of ambition, of the kind of admirable work ethic that gets celebrated in every culture that has ever told its people that suffering is the price of worthiness. What I am talking about is hustle, not effort, not commitment, not the beautiful and necessary engagement of your full capacity in the service of a meaningful goal. I am talking about the specific, recognizable, energetically catastrophic mode of action that is generated not from inspiration but from fear, from the relentless, low-frequency panic of someone who does not fundamentally believe the supply is real, who does not trust the current, who is running, always running, not towards something that calls them but away from something that terrifies them. That kind of action is not neutral. It is not simply inefficient or unsustainable, though it is both of those things. It is actively counterproductive at the frequency level, because every action generated from the energy of scarcity broadcasts the frequency of scarcity. And the universe, as we have established, responds to the frequency, not the intention. You can hustle your way into exhaustion while simultaneously reinforcing the very energetic pattern that is keeping the abundance you are working so desperately toward just far enough out of reach to keep you running. Sovereign action is something else entirely, and the difference between the two is something you can feel in your body before your mind has processed a single logical argument about it. Sovereign action has a quality of settledness at its center, a groundedness, a rootedness in the identity of the person who knows who they are and what they are aligned with, and why the thing they are doing matters, not just instrumentally but essentially. It is not slow action or passive action or action without urgency. Some of the most sovereign action I have ever taken has been rapid, bold, and executed under significant time pressure. The difference is not in the pace. It is in the origin. Sovereign action originates in abundance, in the felt sense of already being connected to the source, already being sufficient, already being worthy of the outcome being pursued. And from that origin, the action itself carries a different energetic signature, one that the world around you can feel, often without being able to articulate what they are feeling. The way you can feel the difference between someone who is genuinely confident and someone who is performing confidence, even when the surface behaviors look identical. The framework I use to distinguish sovereign action from fear-driven hustle in real time, in the middle of a decision, in the heat of an opportunity, in the moment when the pressure is highest and clarity is most difficult to access, I call the three signals. The first signal is physical. and it is the most immediate and reliable indicator available to you. Before you take an action, before you send the email or make the call or sign the agreement or commit the resources, pause long enough to ask your body a single question. Does this feel like moving towards something or running from something? The answer will arrive not as a thought but as a sensation. Moving toward has a quality of expansion, not always comfortable, often genuinely challenging and even frightening in the way that all genuine growth is frightening. But underneath the fear there is a current of aliveness, of rightness, of this is mine to do that is unmistakable once you have learned to recognize it. Running from has a different quality entirely, a kind of driven, pressured, almost frantic energy that masquerades as motivation but feels, when you press gently on it, like panic with a plan. Learn to feel the difference. Practice distinguishing between them in low-stakes situations so that when a high-stakes moment arrives, your capacity for discernment is already developed and available. The second signal is what I call the clarity test, and it operates at the level of thought rather than sensation. Sovereign action is always accompanied by a quality of genuine clarity about the why, not just the what and the how, but the deeper, more essential reason that this particular action serves the larger vision of who you are becoming and what you are building. That clarity does not mean the absence of uncertainty about outcomes. Uncertainty about outcomes is the permanent condition of anyone operating at the edge of their current capacity, which is exactly where meaningful expansion requires you to operate. What I mean by clarity is something more fundamental, a clear knowing that this action is aligned with your values, consistent with your identity, and connected to something that genuinely matters rather than something that merely relieves anxiety. Fear-driven hustle very rarely passes the clarity test, because fear-driven hustle is almost always reactive, a response to a stimulus rather than an expression of a vision. And reactive action, however energetic and disciplined it appears from the outside, is always being driven by the old blueprint rather than the new identity. It is the ancestral pattern operating under the alias of productivity, and it will produce the ancestral results regardless of how hard you push. The third signal is perhaps the most subtle and the most powerful, and it is the one I most wish someone had named for me earlier in my financial journey because it would have saved me years of misdirected effort. I call it the resonance check, and it works like this. After you have identified the physical signal, after you have applied the clarity test, you ask one final question before committing to the action. The question is, does this action make sense to the person I am becoming, or only to the person I have been? Because here is the thing about growth, real quantum, identity-level growth. It consistently requires actions that the old self cannot fully justify or explain. Actions that look from the vantage point of the old frequency, like risk, like arrogance, like reaching for something that is not yet confirmed as available. The old self always has reasons, genuinely logical, apparently responsible reasons, for staying within the known parameters, for not sending the proposal to the client who seems out of your league, for not raising your prices to the level that reflects your actual value, for not making the investment in yourself that the next level of your growth requires. The resonance check is the practice of bringing those decisions to the identity of your future self rather than your current self, and asking whether that person, the sovereign, abundant, fully expressed version of you that you have been cultivating throughout this entire journey, would recognize the hesitation as wisdom or as fear in a reasonable disguise. I want to talk about something that exists in the space between inner work and outer action, because I think it is one of the most practically important and least glamorously discussed aspects of all transformation. It is the question of environment, of the physical, social, and informational spaces you inhabit daily, and the degree to which those spaces are calibrated to support or suppress your new frequency. Your environment is not neutral. It is constantly, actively, at every moment, either reinforcing your old blueprint or supporting your new one. The conversations you are in regularly, the content you consume, the spaces you physically occupy, the people whose financial beliefs and behaviors you are exposed to most frequently. All of these are sending continuous energetic signals to your nervous system about what is normal, what is possible, and who you are in relation to money, and a nervous system that is receiving mixed signals, new identity from internal practice, old identity from environmental exposure, will default under pressure to the environmental signal. Because the environment is louder, it is more constant, it requires no effort to absorb. Internal practice requires intentionality. Environmental absorption is simply the cost of presence. This is why one of the most sovereign and practical actions available to you right now today, this week, without waiting for any further insight or preparation, is a deliberate audit of your environment. Inputs and an intentional recalibration of them toward frequencies that support your expansion. This does not necessarily mean abandoning relationships or communities that matter to you. It means being conscious about the ratio of your exposure. It means actively seeking out environments, conversations, and informational inputs that normalize abundance, that make prosperity feel like a natural and common condition rather than an anomalous event, so that your nervous system receives consistent reinforcement of the new frequency from the outside as well as from within. It means building, deliberately and without apology, the environmental conditions that your new identity needs to become self-sustaining rather than dependent on constant conscious effort to maintain. Because the goal is not to be someone who works hard at having an abundance mindset. The goal is to be someone for whom abundance is simply the operating system, the default condition from which everything else proceeds. And that goal is achieved not through more effortful inner work alone, but through the intelligent, sovereign design of the life conditions that make your new frequency the path of least resistance rather than the path of most effort. And this leads us directly into the territory of sustainability, the question that separates genuine transformation from temporary inspiration. The work that consolidates everything we have built here into a living, breathing, self-reinforcing daily practice. Because the quantum reversal opened the door. The sacred audit revealed the wound. The rewiring began the healing. The golden current showed you the ocean. And sovereign action has begun moving you through the world in a new and more powerful way. But none of it holds, none of it compounds into the kind of lasting, structural, irreversible change that I am talking about, without the daily practices that I have come to think of as the harvest protocol. The system that keeps the channel open, keeps the current flowing, and keeps you anchored in your sovereign identity even when the world, as it periodically will, does its best to pull you back into the familiar gravity of the old blueprint. There is a particular wisdom that farmers carry that most people who have never worked the land have never fully absorbed. And it is this: the harvest does not reward the person who worked hardest in a single season. It rewards the person who understood the rhythm, who knew when to plant and when to rest, who read the soil before they trusted the seed, who showed up not with the frantic energy of someone trying to force growth but with the patient, attentive, deeply informed consistency of someone who understood that certain processes cannot be rushed without being ruined, that the intelligence operating beneath the surface of the ground is older and more sophisticated than any individual effort applied to it, and that the most powerful thing a farmer can do on many days is simply create the conditions for what is already trying to grow without obstruction. That farmer's wisdom is exactly the wisdom required to sustain a financial transformation beyond the initial breakthrough, because the breakthrough is the planting. What we are talking about now, the harvest protocol, is the tending, the daily and dramatic, unglamorous, absolutely essential work of maintaining the conditions in which your new frequency can deepen its roots, expand its reach, and eventually produce the kind of harvest that does not just feed a single season but regenerates the soil for every season that follows. The protocol has 5 elements, and I want to be honest with you about their nature before I describe them. They are not complicated. They are not elaborate. They will not impress anyone at a dinner party with their sophistication. What they are is consistent, and consistency is the single most undervalued currency in the entire economy of personal transformation. I have met people with extraordinary insight, profound spiritual experiences, and genuinely moving breakthroughs who are still in the same financial reality They were in 5 years ago because insight without consistent practice is a seed without soil. It germinates briefly, it produces a shoot of genuine hope, and then, without the daily tending of a practice that keeps the conditions right, it retreats back into dormancy. The 5 elements of the harvest protocol are the soil. They are what keeps the seed alive through the seasons when nothing visible appears to be happening above the surface, which is, almost always, when the most important growth is occurring below it. The first element is what I call the evening ledger, and it is perhaps the simplest practice in the entire protocol, which is precisely why it is the one most likely to be underestimated and skipped. Every evening, not most evenings, not evenings when you remember, every evening, before the day closes, you spend 5 minutes recording 3 things. Not in a gratitude journal in the generic sense, though gratitude is embedded in the practice. You record with as much sensory and emotional specificity as you can bring to it. 1 moment from the day when you noticed abundance flowing toward you in any form. 1 moment when you chose a sovereign response over a fear-driven one. And 1 piece of evidence, however small, that your frequency is shifting, that you responded to a financial trigger differently than you would have 6 months ago. Or that an opportunity appeared that would not have been visible to you from your old vantage point. This practice does several things simultaneously. It trains your reticular activating system, the part of your brain responsible for filtering what you notice from the vast field of available experience, to scan for evidence of abundance and expansion rather than evidence of lack and limitation. It creates a written record of your progress that you can return to on the days when the old gravity is strongest and your new identity feels fragile. And it ends each day with your nervous system oriented toward sufficiency rather than scarcity, which directly influences the quality and the content of the subconscious processing that occurs during sleep. The hours when the deepest layers of the blueprint are most accessible to revision. The second element is frequency anchoring, and it addresses one of the most practically challenging aspects of sustaining a new energetic identity in the middle of a life that has not yet fully reran. Get itself to reflect that identity. Because here is the reality that nobody in the transformation space talks about with enough honesty. After the breakthrough, you still have the same bank account, the same bills, the same conversations with the same people who knew you before the shift, the same morning mirror. And all of those things are sending you continuous feedback that conflicts with the new identity you are building, and that conflict, if you do not have a strategy for navigating it, will erode your new frequency the way water erodes stone. Slowly, imperceptibly, until one day you realize the riverbed has shifted back and you are not entirely sure when it happened. Frequency anchoring is the practice of installing, in your physical environment, deliberate sensory cues that pull you back into your sovereign frequency whenever the external circumstances are pulling you toward the old one. These anchors are personal. What works as a frequency anchor is specific to your sensory system and your particular emotional associations. For some people, it is a physical object that carries a strong positive, energetic charge, something held in the hand that immediately produces the felt sense of abundance and possibility. For others, it is a sound ascent, a piece of music that reliably and rapidly recalibrates the nervous system toward expansion. The anchor itself matters less than the consistency with which you use it, the deliberate, repeated pairing of the anchor with the sovereign frequency state, until the association is so deeply encoded that the mere presence of the anchor begins to produce the state automatically. The way the smell of a specific food can instantly transport you to a specific memory with a completeness and a vividness that no amount of conscious effort could replicate. The third element of the harvest protocol is what I call the weekly vision immersion, and it operates at a longer time scale than the daily practices, serving a different but equally essential function in the sustainability of your transformation. Once each week, I have found Sunday evenings to carry a particular quality of openness that makes them ideal for this practice, though you will find your own natural timing. You spend 30 uninterrupted minutes in deliberate, vivid, emotionally engaged visualization of your financial future as a fully realized present reality. Not as a wish, not as a hope, as a memory of something that has already occurred, described from the vantage point of someone looking back on it with the warm, detailed, sensory richness of genuine recollection. This distinction between visualizing a desired future and remembering an already accomplished reality is not semantic, it is neurological. The brain processes vivid, emotionally charged visualization and actual memory through overlapping neural pathways, which means that a sufficiently detailed and emotionally real visualization of an abundant future literally begins to create the neural architecture of someone for whom that future is familiar, known, expected. And expectation, as we established in the very first chapter of this journey, is the frequency the universe actually responds to. You are not fooling yourself. You are training your expectation system to recognize abundance as its natural home rather than as an anomaly requiring extraordinary effort and improbable luck to produce. The fourth element is sacred accountability, and it is the one that most people most strongly resist, which is usually an accurate indicator of how much they need it. Sacred accountability is the practice of being in regular, honest, frequency-aware conversation with at least one other person who is engaged in the same process of financial transformation that you are. Not a cheerleader, not a coach in the transactional sense, but a genuine peer witness. Someone who knows the specific shape of your old blueprint and can therefore recognize when you are operating from it, even when you cannot see it yourself. Someone with whom you have an explicit agreement to be honest about the gap between the identity you are building and the behaviors you are actually producing, without the gap becoming a source of shame or self-punishment. The reason this element is so powerful and so resisted is that the old blueprint is most invisible to the person carrying it. The blind spots of our financial conditioning are, by definition, the places we cannot see clearly. A mirror that only shows you what you want to see is not a mirror. It is a painting. Sacred accountability is the practice of choosing a real mirror, someone whose clarity about your patterns is not compromised by the same emotional investment in those patterns that you necessarily carry, and returning to it regularly, not as an act of self-exposure but as an act of self-liberation. The fifth and final element of the harvest protocol is one I call the tithing of attention, and it is perhaps the most philosophically dense of the five, though its practical expression is simple enough to begin today. The tithing of attention is based on a principle that I consider foundational to the entire architecture of sustained abundance. What you consistently give your focused, appreciative, energetically engaged attention to grows. Not metaphorically, literally, measurably, in the actual fabric of your daily experience. The areas of your life that you attend to with genuine curiosity and care and presence expand in direct proportion to the quality of that attention. And the areas you attend to with anxiety, with aversion, with the low-grade dread of someone who looks at a problem rather than a possibility, contract in direct proportion to the quality of that attention too. The tithing of attention is the daily practice of deliberately, consciously directing 10% of your intentional attention, not your default, reactive, scrolling through the anxiety attention, but your genuine, present, focused, appreciative attention toward the evidence of abundance that already exists in your life, toward the vision of the abundance that is coming, and toward the gratitude for the gap between those 2 points, as a space of genuine, sacred, unstoppable becoming rather than a space of lack and impatience and the grinding frustration of not yet. These 5 elements together, the evening ledger, frequency anchoring, weekly vision immersion, sacred accountability, and the tithing of attention form a living system, not a checklist, not a regimen in the mechanical sense. A living system, which means it breathes, it adapts, it deepens over time as you deepen in your relationship with it. Some days one element will carry more weight than the others. Some weeks the weekly vision immersion will feel electric and alive, and you will emerge from it changed in ways you can feel in your hands. Other weeks it will feel dry, effortful, like speaking a language you have not yet fully learned. Both experiences are valid. Both are part of the process. The harvest does not come only from the days the work feels inspired. It comes from the totality of the tending, from the cumulative, compounding weight of showing up for your own transformation with the same patient devotion that the farmer shows up for the field. Day after day, season after season, trusting the intelligence beneath the surface even when the surface shows nothing yet, especially then, because beneath the surface, in the rich and ancient soil of your rewired blueprint, something extraordinary is growing, something that has been trying to grow in you your entire life, waiting only for the conditions to be right. And the conditions at last are right, which brings us to the final chapter. The one I have been building towards since the very first word of this journey, the breakthrough declaration, the moment you seal everything we have done here into a sovereign, unstoppable, permanent claim on the abundant life that was always, without exception, without condition, without asterisk or qualification of any kind, meant for you. We have traveled a long way together, through the inherited lies and the invisible walls, through the frequency beneath the fear and the quantum reversal that changed the direction of everything, through the sacred audit of wounds that were never truly yours to carry, and the patient, devoted work of rewiring a blueprint that was written before you had the language to question it, through the golden current and the sovereign action, and the daily tending of a harvest that is already, in ways you may not yet be able to fully see but can perhaps begin to feel, breaking through the surface of your life with the quiet, unstoppable insistence of something that has been trying to grow in you for a very long time. We have covered terrain that most people spend entire lifetimes avoiding, not because they lack the courage but because nobody ever told them that the territory was navigable, that there was a path through it, that on the other side of the honest, difficult, transformative work of facing your own financial conditioning was not just a better bank balance, but a fundamentally different relationship with yourself. With your own worthiness, your own authority, your own sovereign right to receive the fullness of what this life has always been trying to offer you. And now we arrive at the place where all of that work converges into a single act. Not a strategy, not a technique, an act of declaration, which is, in the oldest and most powerful traditions of human spiritual practice, the moment when internal transformation becomes externally binding. When the shift that has been occurring in the private interior of your consciousness crosses the threshold into the shared reality of the spoken, the claimed, the irrevocably committed to. There is a reason that every wisdom tradition on earth uses spoken declaration as a pivot point in its most sacred ceremonies. Words spoken with genuine intention, from a state of genuine alignment, carry a vibrational weight that internal thought alone does not. They vibrate the air. They vibrate the body that produces them. They create a resonance that extends beyond the moment of their utterance in ways that science is only beginning to measure and that human beings have known in their bones, for as long as they have had bones to know things with. What you declare, from a place of genuine sovereign authority, you claim. And what you claim, the universe, which has always been listening, which has never once not been listening, begins immediately to organize itself around. Before we arrive at the declaration itself, I want to do something with you. I want to ask you to take a moment and feel the distance between who sat down with this content and who is here now. Not the logical distance. I am not asking you to catalog the insights you have gathered or assess the ideas you have encountered. I am asking you to feel the energetic distance, the shift in your body, the quality of the space behind your sternum right now compared to when we began. For many people, this moment produces something unexpected, not the triumphant surge of motivation that transformation content often promises, but something quieter and more substantial. A settling, a sense of having put something down that was very heavy, and having not yet fully registered the lightness that comes with its absence. That settling is significant. That is not the absence of transformation. That is what transformation actually feels like when it is real rather than performed. Not a peak but a foundation. Not a feeling to be chased but a ground to be stood on. Stand on it now. Feel it beneath you. It is yours. It was always yours. You are simply finally allowing yourself to inhabit it without apology. Now I want to walk you through the full architecture of the breakthrough declaration, because this is not a single sentence spoken once and forgotten. It is a living document, a personal covenant between the self you have been and the self you are now irrevocably becoming, that you will return to, refine, deepen, and redeclare each new threshold of your expanding life. The decoration has four movements, and each movement addresses a different dimension of the transformation we have navigated together. The first movement is the release, the formal, conscious, energetically complete letting go of the old identity, not with anger or self-recrimination or the dramatic performance of rejection, but with the genuine, warm, clear-eyed acknowledgement of someone who has understood why they were who they were, has honored the protection that identity offered in its time, and is now, with full sovereign authority, choosing differently. Speak this or something true to your own language and your own specific journey out loud and with your full breath behind it. I release the identity of lack. I release the belief inherited and then examined that scarcity is my nature or my destiny. I release the financial wounds I have carried that were never mine to carry in the first place, the fears of those who came before me, the ceilings of those who loved me, the limitations of a story that was written about me before I had the voice to write my own. I release them with gratitude for what they protected and with clarity about what they cost. I put them down. I put them down completely. I put them down now. Feel what happens in your body when you say those words with genuine intention. Feel the exhale that follows them, the specific quality of release that accompanies the laying down of something you have been carrying so long you forgot it was a weight and started believing it was just the way your body felt. That exhale is not small. That is the sound of the old blueprint beginning its final dissolution. Honor it, give it a full breath, and then move into the second movement. The second movement is the recognition, the formal acknowledgement of what you have always been beneath the conditioning, beneath the programming, beneath the accumulated sediment of every limiting belief and inherited wound and self-protective ceiling. This is not affirmation of what you are becoming. This is recognition of what you have always been and are now simply remembering with sufficient clarity to act from. Speak this aloud with the full weight of someone who is not performing a hope but stating a fact that has always been true and is only now being fully claimed. I recognize myself as a sovereign being whose nature is abundance. Not abundance as a reward for sufficient suffering or sufficient effort or sufficient worthiness demonstrated to an external judge. Abundance as my original frequency, the signal I was broadcasting before the world taught me to broadcast fear. I was never broken. I was never insufficient. I was never fundamentally separate from the flow of divine supply that moves through and around and within every living thing. I was blocked, and I am no longer blocked. The channel is open, the current is moving, and I am, at the level of my deepest and most authentic self, exactly what prosperity has always been looking for. The third movement is the commitment, the forward-facing, action-orienting, daily life-shaping declaration of how you intend to move through the world from this point forward, not as a set of rules or disciplines imposed from outside, but as the natural expression of a sovereign identity that has been chosen, claimed, and is now being lived. This movement has teeth. It is specific. It names the behaviors, the practices, the patterns of response that will distinguish your new self from your old one in the daily, ordinary, and glamorous circumstances where transformation either holds or dissolves. I commit to the morning calibration, to beginning each day in the frequency of abundance before the world has the opportunity to remind me of the frequency of lack. I commit to sovereign action, to moving through my days from inspiration rather than desperation, from alignment rather than anxiety, from the identity of who I am becoming rather than the memory of who I have been. I commit to the harvest protocol, to the daily, consistent, patient tending of the inner conditions that sustain my new frequency through every season, including and especially the seasons when the harvest is not yet visible above the surface. I commit to receiving fully, graciously, without deflection or minimization, every form of abundance that moves toward me, in the understanding that my willingness to receive is the measure of my openness to the current. And I commit to circulation, to letting abundance flow through me and onward with the easy confidence of someone who lives at the edge of an infinite ocean and has released. completely and permanently, the scarcity-driven impulse to grab what flows. Feel the weight of that commitment in your body. Feel the difference between making a resolution, which the mind makes and the mind often breaks, and making a covenant, which the whole self makes, and the whole self is called to honor. This is a covenant between you and the version of yourself that has been waiting with extraordinary patience for exactly this moment of recognition, between you and the current that has been flowing toward you your entire life, looking for an opening wide enough to move through, between you and the ancient, sovereign, unstoppable truth that abundance is not something you find. It is something you remember. And you are remembering it now in real time, with your full body and your full breath, and your full irreversible intention. The fourth and final movement of the breakthrough declaration is the one I call the CO, the single, distilled, completely personal statement that captures the essence of everything you have reclaimed in this journey in language so specific to your own experience and your own truth that it could belong to no one else. I cannot write this one for you. I can only tell you what it feels like when you have found it. It is short. It is clear. It has the quality of something remembered rather than invented. And when you say it, something in you goes quiet in the way that something goes quiet when a long-running argument finally reaches its resolution. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of completion. Of a question that has been answered so thoroughly that it no longer needs to be asked. Take a moment. Sit with everything this journey has moved through you. And find your CO. The single sentence that, from this point forward, is the North Star of your sovereign financial identity. The statement that you return to when the old gravity pulls. The declaration that reminds you, in the compressed language of your own deepest truth, of everything you have understood, released, reclaimed, and chosen in the course of this extraordinary inner work. When you find it, and you will find it, because it has been forming in you since the very first word of this journey, speak it aloud. Speak it to the room. Speak it to the current. Speak it to the version of yourself that has been waiting the longest to hear it. And then live it. Not perfectly. Not without struggle or setback or the occasional humbling reminder that growth is not a straight line. But consistently, devotedly, with the patient, sovereign, harvest-minded commitment of someone who has finally understood that they were never broke. That the problem was never a lack of resources, talent, worthiness, or divine favor. That the only thing that ever stood between them and the abundant life they were designed to live was a wall built from borrowed beliefs, and that they have now, with full consciousness and full authority, taken that wall apart, stone by stone, and used the material to build something new, something true, something theirs. The current is real, the ocean is infinite, and you finally, completely, irrevocably, you are open.